After breakfast, the emperor, faithful to his resolution of yesterday, proceeded with his work. He finished the chapter of Castiglione and then went to the wood with the intention of waiting for the calash in continuance of the conversation which had been brought on by the chapter. He related that Josephine had left Brescia with him and had thus commenced the campaign against Wurmser. Arrived at Verona, she had witnessed the first shots that were fired when she returned to Castelnuovo. She saw the wounded as they passed. She was desirous of being at Brescia, but she found herself stopped by the enemy, who was already at Ponte Marco. In the anxiety and agitation of the moment, she was seized with fear and wept a great deal on quitting her husband, who exclaimed when embracing her, and with a kind of inspiration, Wurmser shall pay dearly for those tears which he causes thee. She was obliged to pass in her carriage very close to the fortifications of Mantua. She was fired upon from the place, and one of her suite was even wounded. She traversed the Po, Bologna, Ferrara, and stopped at Lucia, attended by dread and the unfavorable reports which were usually spread around our patriotic armies, but she was internally supported by her extreme confidence in her husband's good fortune. Such was, however, already the opinion of Italy, observed the emperor, that the sentiments impressed by the French general, that in spite of the crisis of the moment and of all the false reports which accompanied him, his wife was received at Lucca by the Senate and treated by it with the same respect as a very great princess. It came to compliment her and presented her with oils of honor. It had reason to applaud itself for that conduct. A short time afterwards, the couriers announced the prodigious achievements of her husband and the annihilation of Wurmser. The emperor returned to the saloon for the first time since the fire. It is gradually furnished with articles sent expressly from London, which make it a little more tolerable. After dinner, the emperor began with reading Thackeray, with which he said, notwithstanding all its wit, he felt himself disgusted in consequence of its vulgarity, but it bore, he remarked, the impression of Le Sage. He then took up L'Avocat Patelin and was much amused with its genuine comic force. The ninth, the emperor breakfasted in the tent and revised the chapter of the Brenta. At 3 o'clock, he took an airing in the calash. The governor called. During our ride, it was understood that he wished to speak to the emperor on the celebration of the Prince Regent's birthday, which is to take place next Monday, the 12th, and he gave him notice of the salutes and volleys that are to be fired on the occasion at the camp situated so close to us. It is said, on the other hand, that he has given directions for supplying the emperor's table only, and that each of us is to be put on a particular allowance, as he finds the expense very much beyond his credit. We shall see, however. The 10th, the emperor was indisposed and took a bath. At 3, he walked out and called for the carriage. He had just read the history of Catherine. She was, he said, a commanding woman. She was worthy of having a beard upon her chin. The catastrophes of Peter and that of Paul were seraglio revolutions, the work of janissaries. These palace soldiers are terrible and dangerous in proportion as the sovereign is absolute. My imperial guard might also have become fatal under anyone but myself. The emperor said that he and Paul had been on the best terms together at the time of his murder, in which the public spared neither his relations nor his allies. He had concerted a plan with him at that very moment for an expedition to India, and he would have certainly prevailed upon him to carry it into execution. Paul wrote to him very often and at great length. His first communication was curious and original. Citizen First Consul, he had written to him with his own hand. I do not discuss the merits of the rights of man, but when a nation places at its head a man of distinguished merit and worthy of esteem, it has a government, and France henceforth one in my eyes. On our return, we found the admiral and his lady. The emperor took them into the calash and made another tour. He afterwards walked for some time with Lady Malcolm, to whom he behaved in a most gracious manner. After dinner, the emperor turned over the leaves of 2 volumes of the Théâtre Français without being able to find anything capable of fixing his attention. The 11th, after our breakfast in the tent and a few turns in the garden, the emperor read for the last time the chapter of Arcole. During our ride in the calash, somebody observed that it was Sunday. We should have mass at the emperor if we were in a Christian country, if we had a priest, and that would have engaged us for an instant during the day. I have always been fond of the sound of bells in the country. We should, he added in a gay tone, resolve upon choosing a priest among us, the curate of St. Helena. But how ordain him? It was said without a bishop, and I'm not one, replied the emperor. Have I not been anointed with the same oil, consecrated in the same manner? Were not Clovis and his successors anointed at the time with the formula of Rex Christique Sacerdos? Were they not, in fact, real bishops? Was not the subsequent suppression of that formula caused by the jealousy and policy of the bishops and popes? I did not eat at dinner. The emperor wished to know the cause. I had a severe pain in my stomach, a complaint to which I said I was very subject. I am more fortunate than you, he observed. I have not during my life felt any pain in my head or in my stomach. The emperor often repeated what he had said, and he has pronounced these same words perhaps 10, 20, or 30 times in the midst of us at different moments. The 12th, the emperor passed the morning in his bath, reading the journals. Data of March and April, received yesterday by way of the Cape. The emperor was very much occupied with them. They produced a great degree of agitation in the system in general, since the emperor had received books, and particularly the Moniteur. He continued much more at home. He scarcely went abroad. He no longer used a horse, nor even the calash. He hardly took the air for a few moments in the garden. He was not the better for it. His features and his health underwent a visible alteration. I found him today reading Les Croisades de Michaud, which he left to run over Les Memoirs de Besenval. He stopped at the duel between the Comte d'Artois and the Duc de Bourbon. He found the details curious, but they seemed to be very remote from us. It is difficult, he observed, to see times so close to each other and manners so different. In the course of this day's conversations, the emperor happened to repeat what I have mentioned elsewhere, that his finest maneuver had been Eckmühl, without, however, specifying it any further. The 13th. At an early hour in the morning, I accompanied the emperor very far into the wood. He conversed for upwards of an hour on the situation of France, and then reverted to the persons who had betrayed him and the numerous fatalities which had hurried him along to the perfidious security caused by his marriage with Austria, to the infatuation of the Turks, who made peace precisely when they ought to have made war, to that of Bernadotte, who was actuated by his self-love and his resentment rather than by his real grandeur and stability, to a seasoned rigorous beyond measure, and even to the superiority of talent evinced by Mr. de Narbonne, who, discovering the designs of Austria, compelled her to take active measures. Finally, he reverted to the successes of Lutzen and Bautzen, which, by bringing back the King of Saxony to Dresden, put him, Napoleon, in possession of the hostile signatures of Austria and deprived her of all further subterfuge. What an unhappy concurrence, he exclaimed in a most expressive tone. And yet, he continued, the day after the Battle of Dresden, France had already sent a person to treat. It was necessary that Van Damme's disaster should happen at a given moment, the second, as it were, the decree of fate. M. de Talleyrand, to whose conduct the emperor frequently alluded for the purpose of discovery, he said, when he had really begun to betray him, had strongly urged him to make peace on his return from Leipzig. I must, he observed, do him that justice. He found fault with my speech to the Senate, but warmly approved of that which I had made to the legislative body. He uniformly maintained that I deceived myself with respect to the energy of the nation, that it would not cooperate with mine, and that it was requisite for me to arrange my affairs by every possible sacrifice. It appears that he was then sincere. I never, from my own experience, found Talleyrand eloquent or persuasive. He dwelt a great deal and a long time on the same idea. Perhaps also, as our acquaintance was of old date, he behaved in a peculiar manner to me. He was, however, so skillful in his evasions and ramblings that after conversations which lasted several hours, he had gone away, frequently avoiding the explanations and objects I expected to obtain from him on his coming in. With regard to the affairs of the moment and the contents of the last journals, which described France in a constantly increasing agitation. The result was that the chances of the future seemed indefinite, multiplied, and inexhaustible for all Europe, and that there existed at that instant an incontrovertible fact communicated to us from all quarters, that nobody in Europe considered himself in a permanent situation. Everyone seemed to apprehend or to foresee new offense. The emperor kept me to breakfast with him in the tent. He afterwards sent for the Corinna of Madame de Stael and read some chapters of it. He said he could not get through it. Madame de Stael had drawn so complete a likeness of herself in her heroine that she had succeeded in convincing him that it was herself. I see her, said he. I hear her. I feel her. I wish to avoid her. And I threw away the book. I had a better impression of this work on my memory than what I feel at present. Perhaps it is because at the time I read it with my thumb, as Monsieur l'Abbé de Prat ingeniously says, and not without some truth. I shall, however, persevere. I am determined to see the end of it. I still think that it was not destitute of some interest, yet I cannot forgive Madame de Stael for having undervalued the French in her romance. The family of Madame de Stael is unquestionably a very singular one. Her father, her mother, and herself, all three on their knees, regaling each other with reciprocal incense for the better edification and mystification of the public. Madame de Stael may, notwithstanding, exult in surpassing her noble parents when she presumed the right, that her sentiments for her father were such that she detected herself in being jealous of her mother. Madame de Stael, he continued, was ardent in her passions, vehement and extravagant in her expressions. This is what was read by the police while she was under its superintendence. I am far from you, she was probably writing to her husband. Come instantly. I command. I insist upon it. I'm on my knees. My daughter's beside me. I beseech you, come. If you hesitate, I shall kill her first, and then myself. You alone would be guilty of our destruction. She had, said the emperor, combined all her efforts and all her means to make an impression on the general of the army of Italy. Without any knowledge of him, she wrote to him when far off. She tormented him when present. If she was to be believed, the union of genius with a little insignificant Creole, incapable of appreciating or comprehending him, was a monstrosity. Unfortunately, the general's only answer was an indifference which women never forgive, and which indeed he remarked with a smile is hardly to be forgiven. On his arrival at Paris, he was followed with the same eagerness, but he maintained on his part the same reserve, the same silence. Madame de Stael resolved, however, to extract some words from him, and to struggle with the conqueror of Italy, attacked him face to face at the grand entertainment given by Monsieur de Talleyrand, Minister for Foreign Affairs to the victorious general. She challenged him to the middle of a numerous circle to tell her who was the greatest woman in the world, whether dead or living. She who had the most children answered Napoleon with great simplicity. Madame de Stael, at first a little disconcerted, and endeavored to recover herself by observing that it was reported that he was not very fond of women. Pardon me, madame, again replied woman. Napoleon, I'm very fond of my wife. The general of the army of Italy, said the emperor, might no doubt have excited the enthusiasm of the Genoese Corinna to its highest pitch, but he dreaded her political perfidy and her proverbial intemperance. He was perhaps in the wrong. The heroine had, however, been too eager in her pursuit and too often discouraged not to become a violent enemy. She instigated the person who was then under her influence, and he, observed the emperor, did not enter upon the business in a very honorable manner. On the appointment of the tribunate, he employed the most pressing solicitations with the first consul to be nominated member. At 11 o'clock at night, he was on his knees, but at midnight, when the favor was granted, he was already erect and almost in an insulting attitude. The first meeting of the tribunes was a splendid occasion for his invectives against me. At night, Madame de Stael's hotel was illuminated. She crowned her Benjamin in the middle of a brilliant assembly and proclaimed him a second Mirabeau. This farce, which was ridiculous enough, was followed by more dangerous plans. At the time of the concordat against which Madame de Stael was violently inflamed, she united at once against me, the aristocrats, and the Republicans. You have, she exclaimed, but a single moment left. Tomorrow the tyrant will have 40,000 priests at his disposal. Madame de Stael, said Napoleon, having at length tired out my patience, was sent into exile. Her father had seriously offended me before at the time of the campaign of Marengo. I wished to see him on my way, and he struck me merely as a dull-bloated college tutor. Shortly afterwards, and with the hope, no doubt, of again appearing by my help in public life, he published a pamphlet in which he proved that France could neither be a republic nor a monarchy. What it might be, remarked the emperor, was not sufficiently evident. In that work, he called the first consul the necessary man. Lebrun replied to him in a letter of 4 pages in his admirable style that with all his powers of sarcasm he asked him whether he had not done sufficient mischief to France, and whether his pretensions to govern her again were not exhausted by his experiment of the Constituent Assembly. Madame de Stael, in her disgrace, carried on hostilities with the one hand and supplicated with the other. She was informed on the part of the first consul that he left her the universe for the theater of her achievements, that he resigned the rest of the world to her, and only reserved Paris for himself, which he forbade her to approach. But Paris was precisely the object of Madame de Stael's wishes. No matter. The consul was invariably inflexible. Madame de Stael, however, occasionally renewed her attempts under the Empire. She wished to be Lady of the Palace. Yes or no might certainly be pronounced, but by what means could Madame de Stael be kept quiet in a palace? After dinner, the emperor read the Hierarchy, and was frequently interrupted by a burst of admiration. Never did Corneille appear grander, more noble, more nervous to us than on our rock.